the history, the little bit of history that was left is no more.
The flooding event in Eastern Kentucky, all the right elements have to come together, which they did. Having a thunderstorm that had a lot of moisture and it stalled, and in the mountainous regions it doesn't take a whole lot of rain to have at the top of the mountain to have a flood at the bottom, as the old saying goes. And it was very devastating, you know, in how it hit.
This is a traumatic thing, and I think that anybody who has gone down there and, you know, seen the flood or seen the remnants of the flood, they are humbled.
You guys have been hit so hard and it's breaking our hearts. How can we help with the knowledge we're able to help you and your children gain?
So in 2022, the state started preparing for the next Track-1 application, and the committee asked for white papers from across the state, and the only white paper that had unanimous support was CLIMBS. I cannot say how thrilled the Commonwealth is about getting CLIMBS funded. This is $20 million in direct NSF funding. It is $4 million in required state match. The impact of this for the next 5 years is almost impossible to fully describe. CLIMBS is about reaching out to communities. CLIMBS will help protect our communities in the Commonwealth, and it will bolster economic development. This is about resiliency and sustainability in the face of extreme weather and climate events.
For Kentucky, the CLIMBS project offers solutions to how do we do better in protecting our communities. Yes, we're building research infrastructure. Yes, we're trying to become more competitive for federal awards, but at the same time, we're maintaining a focus on how do we help the Commonwealth? How do we help the citizens? How do we make them better prepared for the weather events that are becoming increasingly common? How do we help with building design, building materials that can withstand those with less impact? And overall, how do we help limit the impact of those events on the state's economy?
CLIMBS is critical. One of the things that we have seen in the news is that Kentucky is susceptible to all types of natural hazards, whether it may be some droughts, whether it be flash flooding, whether it be landslides, rock slides, and the like. And one of the things that CLIMBS aims to do is it aims to put all of this in perspective and in context of the local communities, and specifically the local communities in Eastern Kentucky.
CLIMBS is a really important program for Kentucky that's squarely aimed at building climate resilience for communities. The first step in the process is to build up our capacity at Kentucky's universities to understand the dynamics associated with the change in climate, right, and how that will ultimately impact the state. What we hope is that we'll have a much deeper understanding of how changing climate dynamics actually affect different aspects of Kentucky's both natural and built environments, and ultimately its people as well.
There are 8 universities involved in this, and I want to say that those universities are true partners in the research initiatives. There are over 50 faculty and staff involved. Hundreds of students will be supported.
We have scientists, we have engineers, we have computer scientists, we have geologists, we have other kinds of environmental scientists, we have social sciences. So we've got a lot of different people at the table who are bringing a lot of different ideas and really focusing on the problem, not just one part of the problem, but kind of the whole problem, and really being able to build a network of understanding in terms of how to deal with climate resiliency.
It focuses on the science, of course, but then it leads to positive economic impacts, and then the human health benefits, the quality of life benefits. It's going from basic science to the applied science, all under one umbrella, with the ultimate goal is to help the state of Kentucky and its citizens.
For Kentucky, CLIMBS is huge. For the first time in decades, we're doing science and engineering to benefit the Commonwealth in real time. We're hitting major issues in southeastern Kentucky that are limiting our economic development potential, that are damaging our communities, and damaging individual people's homes and lives.
Honor the wisdom that people in eastern Kentucky have garnered over the past couple of years living through these flooding experiences, keeping in mind that the community is going to know better than we are as outsiders what the problem is and what some potential solutions would be.
Being able to focus on helping Kentuckians help themselves.
This is a game changer. This means that Kentucky will be able to transition out of reaction to proactive resilience and mitigation.
Well, I love Project 1 because it's really I feel like the basis for all the other work that we plan to do. I mean, there's so many questions about Kentucky's climate that we don't know. First of all, what are the trends? From what we can see right now, it looks as if Kentucky's temperature is warming, but it also looks that it's actually getting a lot wetter. What impact does that have on, say, agriculture, on energy production, on just commerce in general?
Project 1 within CLIMBS is all about creating a greater understanding of our weather and climate systems here within Kentucky in the recent past, currently, and looking outwards into the future. We're really interested in understanding the high impact weather events that we experience here and trying to determine things like when and where they're occurring, why they're occurring, what the atmosphere looks like during these very particular events. Very specific localized information to Kentucky is something that doesn't exist to date.
Culminating all of these data pieces so that we can start creating some predictive methods that will help with emergency planning, weather predictions, and really try to update and upscale our abilities to help the communities.
CLIMBS, the Project 1, will take that data, feed it into the climate models, feed it into the numerical high resolution models, and give us a much more refined prediction for Kentucky of what we can expect 5, 10, 50 years from now. That currently without CLIMBS, we don't quite have that capability in place.
Project 2 uses different aspects of Kentucky's geological record to understand the history of climate change. In a nutshell, what we do is we use different aspects of sediments from Kentucky and soils and tree rings and deposits from caves to understand how climates have changed in the past, and that will ultimately help us contextualize how climate will change in the future.
So Project 2 is going to let us look at a lot of things in geosciences that you would often think of as unrelated. We're going to be digging holes called trenches across watersheds in eastern Kentucky to sample the sediments from the top all the way down to the bedrock, to look for flooding horizons, to look for rafted logs and bits of charcoal so that we can date the sediments, to look at changes in plant communities, fungal communities. So we're putting together natural hazards with paleontology, with figuring out how old these sediments are, which is not something we've ever done in Kentucky before.
When we went out after the 2022 floods, we were out measuring debris heights and things to try to figure out, like, how big was this flood? How would we reproduce it if we had to model it? And one of the things we kept coming back to was this idea that this was this incredibly catastrophic flood, but maybe in the greater history of things, and of course in what we can expect in the future, it wasn't that big. So we want to know that for sure, and that's what Project 2 is focused on trying to decipher.
The P2 project will integrate all of the data sets for the first time in Kentucky and come up with a seamless forecast of what's likely to come in the future.
So project 3 is how much water do we have at any time, and what is the quality of it? How good is it? So as climate changes, it will change the biodiversity and allow new species that harm the water quality, algae blooms. The climate hazards can either give us too little water in drought, it can give us too much water in floods, and so we're trying to understand where those boundaries are, and so that we can design communities that can sustain with minimal impact. Groundwater modeling is currently more of an ad hoc thing in specific areas. Kentucky has 12 major watersheds, and so the ability to integrate this modeling over all of our watersheds and know what our groundwater budget is will be the new thing that comes from CLIMBS. Without the resources that CLIMBS brings to the table, it would be impossible to do holistically.
Project 4 is really about flooding, but it's really trying to think about the initiation of flooding and why it happens and why it happens in specific areas. We all know that when it's a major event, we think of these huge volume of water flowing downriver. But what happens farther and farther upstream? And where do these things initiate? And are we able to predict at the very start of this flooding event to identify when it is going to be significant so we can start to get more of an early warning?
What we're trying to do with Project 4 is install different types of sensors in different locations to optimize predictions of where and when a flood might occur. And this is thinking of smaller streams, so the streams that you might have in your backyard that definitely can flood.
Right now, a lot of our flood instrumentation and our river instrumentation data is located right outside our major population centers. We want to know what's going to happen in the major cities. There is very little data upstream. And most of the waterways in Kentucky, 70% of them are the headwater streams, and there's almost no data there. What this project really tries to do is leverage the large-scale data that we have from other resources, but then work to fill in the missing data for the headwater stream so we can get a real picture of the entire water course from the top to the bottom.
Project 5 is that whole concept of mitigating a hill slope instability or landslides. So we're going to be putting instrumentation on actual hill slopes that are prone to landsliding. We're going to monitor climate variables such as rainfall, atmospheric temperature, and the like. The environmental variables such as the soil moisture, soil temperature, and we will relate those to the actual stability of those hill slopes. But more so, we want to be able to predict the landsliding.
Why did this place on a slope fail during this storm, but just a few hundred meters over, it didn't? Landslide prediction is a little bit like earthquake prediction in that specific places and specific times to do that is very challenging, if not impossible. But what we can do is better understand the conditions on slopes to develop things like advisories, warnings, watches.
So what is extremely novel is actually having measured data. If we're putting this instrumentation on slopes that's prone to sliding, the idea or the thought is that within the 5-year duration of this project, one of those slopes will actually slide. And so therefore, we will actually have measured data while the slope is sliding, and that has not been done. If I can predict the weather, or climate in this case, if I can predict changes short-term and long-term, that means that I can predict how my communities will respond. And if I can predict how my communities will respond with reference to some climate event, then I can do better planning. And so we use this term community resilience. We're going to connect our transportation systems, our communication systems, our power systems, our water systems, and something that many folks don't get into is the human systems, the human interactions. When you think about what happens during floods, how people respond, some people stay in their homes, some people leave. Some people leave going along certain routes. Some people congregate after or during the event in certain locations. All of that human activity, to be able to bring that together and under one analysis, well, it helps us to plan. So it is a holistic, comprehensive approach to looking at climate resiliency.
Project 7 within CLIMBS, we feel really helps complete the circle of the overall CLIMBS framework, where we're able to learn from advances in the scientific understanding and the early objectives, but then ensure that we're closing that loop and making sure our research yields tangible outcomes for the community here in Kentucky.
7 is looking at evaluating the current level of threat assessments across Commonwealth with the eye on the gaps. What tools do we need to add to the toolbox to be able to better develop a more realistic threat assessment?
For us, that's looking at this intersection point of climate and climate change, emergency management and disaster detection, where through collaborations with folks here at Western Kentucky University, University of Louisville, and University of Kentucky, we're able to pair expertise with AI and machine learning with strong understandings of the atmospheric science and also how risk management strategies are deployed across the state.
We follow that with artificial intelligence and taking the risk models as well as the forecast models from the meteorology side and the climate side and putting those all together and teaching the AI tools to be able to help look at patterns, look beyond what the human thought process can be, and to lengthen that time that we have ahead of a disaster to be able to warn people and to obviously save lives and minimize property damage.
The biggest investment that we make with the Track-1 is in new hires. That's really a partnership between Kentucky NSF EPSCoR and the universities themselves. We provide startup funds, we provide some support over the course of the award for new faculty. The universities make the commitment to those hires long term. And bringing in new expertise, bringing in new capabilities with these new hires has the longest term impact on Kentucky. We're bringing somebody in who is going to be working here, doing research focused on Kentucky, and well beyond just the 5-year period of this grant. And so those new hires really have the most profound impact, both within departments and universities, but also just in being able to address issues for the state.
We actually have a very big component that is on broader impacts, really having the ability to focus on getting the word out, educating people across the Commonwealth about what we're doing and what's the science and what's the reason, and really motivating people to care about this issue in terms of just their daily lives, but also hopefully recruiting even more people who are interested in this area that will pursue higher education and ultimately strengthen our workforce. So it's not just about the research, it's about the people.
So the EnviroPods program is a learning program for late middle school and early high school students that exposes them to the technology and the science that we actually use to study these climate-driven natural hazards. And so it's going to be a library-based program. So libraries are the learning centers, especially in rural communities, right? They're kind of these trusted knowledge centers that have existed for decades, if not longer. And so we thought that would be a really great place to base these programs. And we're shooting for day camp, so summer day camp. And so we're going to be bringing teams into certain locations throughout the state to, again, just give them an idea of what geoscientists actually do when we're studying these climate hazards.
Now, at the same time, while we're working with these libraries, we're going to be building these self-contained kits where the idea is there'll be curriculum and materials so that somebody can check out an EnviroPod kit from the library and be able to take it home and work with it themselves, hopefully inspiring that citizen science and really hoping to reach out to additional people who care about climate resilience in Kentucky. So inside of this project, we have a really exciting sub-project, if you will, the Learning Hub. One of the big important things about it is the undergrads that will be involved in it will be in universities all across Kentucky. It's going to be a 10-week program. The undergrads are going to be kind of immersed in it. They're going to be doing research.
We have this expertise all around the state. The Learning Hub's goal is to bring some of these strengths together and then use it mutually to teach all these students.
It helps to develop their sense of identity of science, develop their sense of belonging in the scientific community. They're going to be able to network now with other institutions. The 8 institutions involved in this proposal is highly unique. So from small schools like Thomas More up to the R1s, UKs, U of L's, that interaction for the undergraduate students is highly unique and extremely beneficial.
What the Learning Hub does is it's a pathway or facilitator for the other projects in the CLIMBS initiative, and that is by including graduates, undergraduate students, and in the case of EKU, mostly undergraduate students, and leading them into the bigger project.
The professors and the scientists that are part of the Learning Hub can impact the lives of some students who then go on to become professionals in Kentucky.
Do you want to find the undergrad that really wants to get the very most out of their academic experience? And something like the Learning Hub is a great opportunity for students to be able to do that. But we realize that over a 5-year period, things change. There's new people, there's new ways of looking at it, and we want to be able to support those new ideas. And we do so through seed funding.
Seed grants, education outreach, communication grants, investments for new hires. Those programs are targeted at the comprehensive universities, the private universities. And so what those do is allow people to bring ideas to us. They're peer reviewed. And then we can provide funding, a small amount, that allows them to do research over the course of the year, with the outcome being the expectation that they're going to submit a proposal. It funds them over their summer, it funds their students doing the research, and it helps support their labs, where normally that may not be something that they would be able to have the time and the capabilities to do.
The seed funding will have even broader impact, and I think that's so important, because we want to reach out across the state.
One of the real strengths for Kentucky NSF EPSCoR is the support we receive from the state. We are extremely fortunate that we have a strong partnership with the Cabinet for Economic Development, who provides funding to us to meet the cost share requirements for this program. And why that is important is that really increases the impact we can have. You know, it immediately has a 5-to-1 return on their investment, but long-term it's a much bigger investment. And it's something that, looking at other EPSCoR programs across the country, they all look at us and see that as something that, you know, they quite honestly wish they had.
I think NSF sees that there's a real opportunity here to make a groundswell change in how we characterize and plan for the future of Kentucky.
It also allows for that growth of interactions between faculty at various universities with each other, who prior to this may not have known that they should be working together.
We'll have a community. We'll have a cohesive group, cross-disciplinary, cross-university.
To keep chipping away at climate resiliency statewide.
We'll have built considerable capacity to understand changing climate dynamics in Kentucky, and it will launch a host of new research programs across the state.
That we can now start taking our approaches and our models and applying them not just in Eastern Kentucky, but we can now port these models to other areas in the country.
Not just solve, one problem or two problems, but to be able to solve a lot of problems through the 5 years and beyond.
At every student involved, we could see them matriculate into the graduate school, into the job market.
Everybody's just been excited and all in, which has been comforting and exciting and optimistic for the future.
I believe the Commonwealth has demonstrated through the 4 prior Track-1s to the state government, to the legislators, to our community partners, to our industrial partners, that we are good stewards of the funding, that we are doing what we are supposed to be doing to move the state forward.
Together.
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 Together we will build
climate resilience.
Climate resilience.
Climate resilience
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
Together we will build climate resilience in Kentucky.
This old holler used to be my home, and under that water is everything I own. There was a hardwood floor, used to let me know my wife and daughter were safe at home. And now this lake in the middle of nowhere says there ain't none of that no more. And this storm blowing up from the south got no shame coming to rob the poor. I was hoping I could sit here a moment, maybe say my goodbyes. Here comes the rain, ain't nothing sane in this life. My closest friend's been gone for days. I called out for him, I went down to his place, and 29 souls still cannot be found. That search patrol don't stop when the sun goes down. And this old lake in the middle of nowhere says they ain't coming back no more. And this storm blowing up from the south got no shame coming to rob the poor. I was hoping I could sit here a moment, have myself one last cry. Here comes the rain, ain't nothing sane in this life.